Rustler Paterson and Michael Remus.
Hey, what is up, everybody? Game day, Jets in St. Louis tonight as part of the NHL's Frozen Frenzy. I'm actually pretty fired up for this tonight. All 32 teams in action. The festivities start at 5 p.m. with Philadelphia, I believe, Philly and Washington? Yes, Philly and Washington starting things off today at 5 p.m. 16 games, finishing up with the Kings and Golden Knights starting at 10 p.m. Now, the Jets sandwich right in the middle. There's a lot of weird start times today, 7:15, 6:15, 6:45. The Jets, maybe because they are the team to beat in the NHL right now, the only undefeated team, they get the regular 7 o'clock start time. Perfect. So Jets and Blues tonight. We're going to be all over it. Ken Weeb will join me from St. Louis coming up a little later on now that the pregame skates are done. Before that, though, we will hear from Coach Scott Arneal. Morgan Barron, as well as Vladislav Namestnikov, also spoke, so we'll try and squeeze those guys in today. So we're going to have a ton on Jets Blues tonight on the program. We're also going to talk to John Hodge first up. I want to talk to John about this upcoming game for the Bombers, their predicament going into the final week of the regular season, everything on the line in the Canadian Football League. And we're also going to dig into a little bit of Bisons. I still cannot believe, and if you missed the show yesterday or weren't following on Twitter, the Bisons put together one of the most incredible comebacks you will ever see in football. 3 down, 4 down, you name it. Down 30-4 with a minute left in the third quarter. They stormed back with 26 unanswered and won with one of the ballsiest 2-point convert calls you'll see as well. And what a season they're having. I believe 6-1 now in the year. They've got one final game to play. They will have a home playoff game. So we'll get into football kind of a little earlier with John Hodge and then really focus in on St. Louis tonight as the Jets and Blues go at it in a big Central Division matchup. And the Jets look to remain the only team without a blemish on their record for the season. 5-0 or 5-0 so far on the season, but a lot of hockey to talk about tonight. It'll be fun at the Cool Bet Lines. We just finished up in the lock shop. I think Dusty put together a 15-gamer. I have an 11-gamer for tonight. And then we kind of came together with some more sensible bets for tonight. So we'll touch on that coming up later on in the Cool Bet Lines. Hey, listen, do want to once again thank everybody that joined us last week on Sunday for our first WST game of the month. Listen, it was a special game with Brian Little there, but it was so much fun getting together back in 316 with so many of our WST regulars from the chat and podcast listeners. But again, that's just the first game we are doing this season. What you'll want to do is count yourself in for the next game. We will be doing it right after the Grey Cup. Hopefully everyone's on a big Grey Cup high from the Bombers, completing the job, finishing the story, as Remus likes to say. Shout out Cody Rhodes. On the 17th of November, and then back in Winnipeg for the lone visit of the year of the Stanley Cup champion Panthers and former Jets head coach Paul Maurice. And I did tweet this out. I do like to remind people that Paul Maurice is 0-4 against the Winnipeg Jets since he dipped the way that he did. We will look to make it 0-5 against the Jets on the 19th. Other games that we've got, we're going to do a little bit of a holiday party for that Saturday, December 21st game against the Minnesota Wild. Thursday, January 16th against Seattle, Friday, February 7th against the Islanders, and then Friday, March 28th against the New Jersey Devils. So and I say this especially to podcast listeners that might not get into the fun of the chat daily because they're working, they're listening on the audio afterwards. We'd love to see you out there and meet some of our regulars and bring you more into the fold. So you're going to want to go to winnipegjets.com/WST. click on that game for the November 19th, grab your tickets for that, and make a plan to join us for some of the other games of the month throughout the year. It was a great start. It was a great game, a great win. And let's face it, the vibes are high for Jets and their fans heading into this weekend, or this road trip, I should say, which of course begins tonight. And this is a weird one. We always like to make jokes about how a certain former coach used to always be talking about time zones and whatnot. Well, you can actually, if you want to go down that road, I won't. I hope Scott Arneal doesn't. But man, this is a weird one. Starting in the Central Division, when or in the home time zone tonight in St. Louis, then heading to Seattle for Thursday night against the Kraken, who've had a pretty decent start. And then Saturday night to the Mountain Time Zone, taking on the Calgary Flames on Hockey Night in Canada before coming back to Winnipeg next Monday for the Jets and Leafs. And that, of course, is Winnipeg's first Amazon Prime game. I'll be honest, I was mostly locked into the football last night. But I did check out the broadcast on Prime, and it was really good from what I saw. It was good. I mean, a couple new faces that I wasn't too familiar with. I am a big Adnan Virk guy, so it was great to see Adnan doing his thing. But yes, next Monday, and I hope Jet fans will get out to that game, because we know the Leaf fans are going to be there for it. And I know as season ticket holders, it's easy to go on Fans First and sell your tickets. And I know it probably brings in a windfall, but I think a lot of people involved would just love to see the rink not get taken over as it has been in the past. So let's see what we can do about getting a little bit more of the home team's fans in that building for a Monday. And of course, you won't be able to watch it on regular television if you don't have Amazon Prime. But we'll worry about Monday on Monday. Let's worry about this road trip coming up, which begins tonight in St. Louis, 7:00. We're going to get to St. Louis and get the updates from the morning skate and much more with Ken Weeb. And we will hear from Scott Arneal, as well as Morgan Barron and Vlad Namestnikov, once we finish up chopping it up with John Hodge of 3 Down Nation. Tomorrow, speaking of CFL, we'll have a new episode of CFL 110 with myself and Jeff Hamilton. Stay tuned for that. It, of course, is brought to you by Garage Living Winnipeg. Also want to thank the great list of sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. We couldn't do it without Princess Auto. Of course, our friends at Coolbet will hit the lines a little later on. Canadian Club, F Apparel, Wallace & Wallace, Rollies Transfer, Consolidated Supply, Manitoba Battery, Fans First, Little Brown Jug, Royal Sports, Boston Pizza, and we will get to a why not question of the day for our friends over at Not AutoCorp a little bit later on. Last night was just the one game in the National Hockey League. Leafs get a big win over Tampa. Those are the two teams in the league that are playing on back-to-backs. The other 30 teams were waiting to drop the puck tonight. And as I mentioned, we are going to have no shortage of pucks. I know they normally do the whip around on Amazon on the Thursday nights. I'm not sure if they're planning on it, but tonight would be a pretty darn good night to maybe do one of those as well, because it is going to be tough to keep track of everything going on in and around the league. Of course, we'll have the Jet broadcast on TSN tonight, but I think there'll be plenty of scoreboard watching, much more than we normally get. So the hockey will come. We are going to get into a little bit of football talk earlier with John Hodge. Speaking of football, last night, another incredible performance by Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar, listen, when Lamar goes off, he goes off. 5 touchdowns, no picks. Unsurprisingly, he is the favorite right now, considerable favorite for the MVP to go back-to-back. They didn't really need massive amounts of Derrick Henry, but they got it later on in the game. What did he have, an 81-yard run? And then Tampa making a run of it, trying to get back in the game. Todd Bowles leaving the starters out. Unfortunately, that backfired big time, as Chris Godwin is expected to be out for the season, getting injured late in that game. Mike Evans was already hurt. So Tampa's had a great start to the season, banged up pretty good. The Ravens keep rolling after those 2 early losses to the Chiefs and Raiders. And then a game, I described it to Dustin Nielsen in the lock shop, that Chargers-Cardinals game, that really should have been a Thursday nighter. Didn't it feel like a Thursday nighter? One team just kicking 5 field goals. The other one, some good plays, some ugly plays. And then it finished with a walk-off field goal. And the Cardinals get to 3-4. They're tied with the Niners now, 1 game behind the Seattle Seahawks. And that's a very interesting division right now with nobody running away with it. I think everyone thought the Niners would be much better. Obviously, we know what happened to them on Sunday at the hands of the Chiefs. But it really is anyone's division right now. But the Cardinals very, very much in it. And, of course, they've got a head-to-head win against San Francisco already this season. So, fun Monday night with the doubleheader. Times that by 8, and that is what we've got tonight in the National Hockey League. But let's start it off with a little bit of football talk. Of course, Remo's away. He'll be back in a few days. Connor will be back tomorrow. But getting into our guests a little earlier than normal, it is always a pleasure to welcome in from 3 Down Nation, our buddy, John Hodge. John, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing great, Huss. Thanks for having me.
You know what? I want to get into the CFL with you. Huge game for the Bombers on the weekend. Lots on the line. But before we do that, can we talk about this Bison season that they're having and what happened on the weekend? Like, I kind of laid it out at the start for people that missed yesterday. But down 26, having scored only 4 points through the first 44 minutes of the football game, they put up 26 unanswered, and then the overtime. I mean, not only giving up the touchdown, scoring a touchdown, and having the Stones not only to go for 2, but to call that play back in the end zone to A.K. Gassama. It kind of feels right now that there is a little bit of magic happening with the Bisons in Brian Dobie's final year.
It really does. And I mean, I'll go back to this team's first game against Alberta. It was their homecoming game. 5,000 fans in attendance at Princess Auto Stadium, and they won that game because Alberta scored a late touchdown, were down 1 point, decided to go for 2, and veteran defensive back Nick Conway knocked the ball down at the last possible second, securing a 1-point Bisons win. Well, the Bisons flipped the script, as you said, Huz, in Alberta this past weekend. First of all, they're down, as you mentioned, by 26 points, 30-4. Jackson Tuchinski ends up throwing for 267, rushing for 146 and a touchdown. That's a Lamar Jackson type line for you. Braden Stubbs also put up 134 yards along the ground, owning the line of scrimmage there with guys like Matt Stockman, Gio Vaccaro up front for Manitoba. And then exactly, given the opportunity in overtime, they say, you know what, we could play for the second mini game at 37-37. Instead, we're going to go for 2. And lo and behold, A.K. Gassama makes an incredible catch on the end zone fade, a play that personally I'm not a fan of. I think it's a lower percentage play than a lot of coaches seem to. But in this case, it worked out. Jackson Tuchinski threw the ball up for A.K. Gassama. He made an incredible play on the ball, and it was enough to secure Manitoba's second win this season over Alberta and clinch just their second home playoff game, Huss, since 2014.
Now, they've got another game this weekend. I mean, the Bisons are at 6-1. Of course, the reason why they're in first place, in addition to those 2 big wins over Alberta, was that they went in and for the first time in a decade beat UBC in UBC. Now, UBC had that rough start. They've won 5 in a row. They're 5-2. Manitoba is 6-1. With a win this weekend in their final game, they would clinch first. And I would imagine the funny thing is Alberta's in 4th right now. They could see that same Golden Bears team in the playoffs. But I'll tell you what, that home cooking would be nice to both have the first game and potentially the second game on home field before, if they're lucky enough to survive, move on and make a push for the Vanier Cup in Brian Dobie's final season.
Yeah, the Bisons will clinch first this weekend with a win at Princess Auto Stadium over UBC or a loss to UBC by fewer than 23 points. And the reason for that is the Bisons won the first meeting between these two teams by 23 points. That being said, Huss, that was a long time ago near the start of the season. As you mentioned, the Thunderbirds have won 5 games in a row. They are currently higher ranked in the youth sports football rankings than the Bisons, and I think that illustrates a little bit maybe what prognosticators around the country think of the Bisons versus the Thunderbirds. We know UBC, of course, reigning Canada West champions, played in the Vanier Cup last year. They lost a couple of key players, of course, to the NFL, but Isaiah Knight, their running back, likely to win the Heck Crichton Trophy this year. Maybe there's a push for Taylor Elgersma out of Wilfrid Laurier, but Knight has been sensational, and NFL teams have been blowing up UBC about him trying to get film. There's a chance he could sign a contract down south as early as next season. But to me, if you're the Bisons, you've got to get that home playoff game. And it's for a couple reasons. One is you want to finish on top, as you mentioned, Huss, to host, if not just the first playoff game, but of course, if you win that semifinal, to host the championship for Canada West. But then secondly, you want to get that 4th seed, right? The Saskatchewan Huskies are locked into 3rd place. And it should be noted that, yes, the Bisons won their first meeting, at least their home meeting against the Huskies back to start the season. But Manitoba went into Saskatoon on October 4th and lost that game by 18 points. The Huskies, I think, are trending in the right direction, much like UBC. To me, if you're the Bisons, you want to pull the 4th place team in that first semifinal, win it, and then play the bloodied up and battered winner of UBC Saskatchewan for the Canada West title. You don't want to be in that 2-3 game. So they still have lots to play for this upcoming week, even at 6-1.
Hey, while we're talking about the Bisons and just transitioning into the Bombers, I'm with you on that that end zone fade. I mean, like Gasawa had to make an absolutely incredible play. It wasn't like he was by himself. I mean, there was basically 2 guys there. But of course, he was drafted by the Bombers last year, came into camp, did not really seem to get many looks. Is he going to still be in the mix, do you think, for Winnipeg next year after this season with the Bisons?
Maybe, Huss. There are some murmurs that potentially there could be a change in the league upcoming that would, in a way, without getting caught in the weeds here, would make it a little bit tougher to bring back draft picks from previous years into camp, counting them as counters instead of non-counters. It's unclear if that's going to happen. But a guy like A.K. Gasama, I think, is an absolutely sensational U Sports receiver. The challenge talking to scouts at the professional level, they don't have any questions about his hands, his work ethic. They don't have any question about his body control, his ability to adjust to the football, his ability to run routes, none of that. They have an issue with the fact that he runs 4.6 at about 165 pounds. Like, he is a petite receiver, and he is absolutely chewing it up at the U Sports level. He is climbing those all-time ranks for the Bisons. The question is, does that translate to the professional level? And when you look through the U Sports all-time receiving list, there are kind of 2 types of receivers. There's guys who, the Andy Fantuzes, for instance, who obviously converted extremely well to the professional level. And then there's guys like Alexander Fox, who was, a sensational receiver at Bishops, who was just undersized and couldn't translate that to the professional level. So I'm not counting A.K. Gasama out. I've watched him for the past 4 years. He is exceptionally talented, but I think the odds are stacked against him a little bit, just given his lack of size. You can be that small and play in the CFL if you run 4.3. If you run 4.6, it's a little bit tougher to make that jump, but I'm not going to count him out.
No, and listen, I'll always remember that conversation we had with him last year in and around the draft. Such an interesting person, an amazing story, and a young man that, has grown up learning the game of football and being successful at every level here in Winnipeg. Now with the Manitoba Bisons and being a huge part of this team that's 6-1 and pushing to get into the conversation for the Vanier Cup. It would be really cool to see him take his talents to the Canadian Football League at the end of his youth sports career. One other thing on the Bisons, just before we get to the Bombers. We mentioned it's Brian Dobie's last game. I've had a bunch of really interesting conversations with people in and around football on where the program goes after this. I would be honest. And again, having been separated from the program, I did used to work there before, we went to TSN. And I mean, I knew how much Brian Dobie worked to bring Stan Pierre on as a full-time coach. He has been a mainstay. Von Mitchell as well on the offensive side of things. Stan's the defensive coordinator. I don't know. I had always thought that maybe the succession plan was there for the last 10 years or so for what happens when Brian Dobie hangs him up. I will say this, though. This is a job that is going to be, I think, highly coveted. When you look at the facility that Manitoba has right now, the fact that they're playing at Princess Auto Stadium, the relationship with the Bombers. What are you hearing right now? And I mean, are there other names outside of the people locally, starting with Stan Pierre, that you think might be in the mix for that job once Dobie steps down?
I've heard mixed things. I've spoken to people who think it's essentially a foregone conclusion that Stan Pierre, who's been with that organization for almost 20 years, and I believe also teaches a course at the U of M, will be the next guy there. I've also heard the opposite, and there's potentially some interest even from the CFL level in this job at the University of Manitoba. And you mentioned it, Huss. I do think that given the facility, given somewhat of the recruiting advantage, I'll call it, in Manitoba, right? The province of Saskatchewan is fighting, for example, for a pretty similar sized pie, at least population-wise, with Manitoba, but two programs, right? And the University of Manitoba is the only show in town. They also, with just one U Sports program now, or one post-secondary football program, I should say, out in BC, they do make some hay there. They make some hay in the province of Saskatchewan as well. So I do think that it'll be a coveted job. These U Sports jobs do not open often. We know certainly the job at the University of Manitoba hasn't been open for a very, very long time, with Brian Dobie having such a long and successful run here. So I do think that there will be a true open competition, but I'm hearing mixed things right now. It's tough to know what to believe. Again, some people suggesting, yes, this is 100% Stan's job, but I've also spoken to other people who think, no, this is going to be open, and you might be surprised at least one of the names that ends up in the mix.
Well, you know what? That's kind of some of the things that I've been hearing. And listen, I have long thought that Stan Pierre was the next head coach of the Bisons. I mean, just because, and to your point, like, coaching at the U Sports level is different than professional. I mean, it's basically, you're like a prof. I mean, it's almost impossible to get fired. Like, for a job that traditionally you are hired to be fired in, that's the case just about everywhere except with the universities. So, I mean, I think there is really a unique attraction of a job like that. You combine everything in, I would be interested, very interested in one name, and I don't know if this name has popped up in your conversations at all, is Paul Appolise. In that, I mean, listen, Lapo, certainly very accomplished coach. I mean, he's been a head coach. He's been a coordinator. I mean, the guy knows 3-down football as well as anyone. And then you add in the fact that, his wife is from here. He's been here. Like, at this point in his career, would that be something? And again, I haven't talked to Paul. I'm not starting this, but just this is a name that's kind of thought up, and you wrap your head around it. That might be a great fit. And you would imagine that connection between a guy like Lapo with the Bombers. They already have an incredible, and this kind of goes back to Wade Miller, who is a former Bison player himself, and Kyle Walters, who came from Guelph and, was so versed in U Sports football that, because of the job security and everything else that comes out on this, I mean, Lapo, a guy that's been, had a couple of head coaching jobs and obviously doing broadcasting right now. Like, I think there will be some guys of that level that probably would be interested in this job for a number of the reasons that we've just covered.
I don't disagree, Huss. And then the added challenge there would potentially be, if you're somebody who comes in and you say, well, I don't want any of the existing staff, I want all my guys. That puts the University of Manitoba into a tough spot because, of course, they have people in the building who have tenure, so to speak. But I do think that if you're someone who comes in and says, yeah, you know what, I've known Stan, or I'm happy to build a relationship with Stan and figure that out, or Sean O, who does a lot of the recruiting now for the University of Manitoba, if you're happy to do that, you're not going to be somebody who comes in and insists on bringing in all your own people, then yeah, I think an outside hire like that makes a lot of sense. And I don't know what Brian Dobie makes. I've been led to believe that, for a Canada West head coach, the starting rate is somewhere in and around $110,000. You can make upwards of 200, perhaps even more than that. So the money is not CFL head coaching money, but it's certainly good, right? Like I think a lot of people watching this show or listening to this show would be very happy to be making between $110,000 and $200,000 a year. Now, there are added challenges, right, of being at the post-secondary level. There's recruiting. There's all these other things. But you mentioned it, Hus. There is a lot of job security. Obviously, Brian Dobie, extremely long-tenured coach at the University of Manitoba. I agree. There will be lots of interest for sure.
Well, and as I said, with the Bison or the Bombers on the road this weekend, was it Saturday afternoon? The game is against UBC.
That's correct.
Get out there and check out the squad, and then get ready to get behind the Bisons come playoff time for potentially 2 games. Now, this is a perfect little segue over to the Bombers. We do have a little bit of news that's just broken in the last 15 minutes or so. The National Hockey League has just announced some game changes. And at the top of that list is the Jets and the Dallas Stars on November 9th. Which, of course, is the day of the CFL West Final. Listen, it was a disaster, I think, just for fans in general. And it certainly did not help the Jets to have their home opener opposite a sold-out Bomber game. And I think that, for a game that should have a ton of juice in it, with the Jets and Dallas being at the top of the Central Division, to have that potentially at the same time as the West Final that could very well be at Princess Auto Stadium if the Bombers can do the job on the weekend. This was something that had been moved in the past, and now they've done it. So the Jets and Stars will play at 2 p.m. I believe the West Final is scheduled for 5:30. Not sure whether they adjust that and move it to 6 or 6:30. If I recall correctly, the last time that this happened, they moved the Jet game to 2, and I think the football game got moved a half hour back to 6. And we were able to go to both games. Or if you were at one, you just jumped on the bus, boom, rapid transit down, you were at the game, and I was able to do both. So that is great news. Shout out to anyone that was involved in that decision or made that happen. The other interesting just part of this too is that, like, the Bisons could be playing at home that weekend. And
yeah,
there's no way. So that I guess they'd probably have to go to Friday, or would they do a Sunday game?
So I am, and by the way, we're speaking of conflicts. The tragedy is that on Saturday at 2 p.m., the Bombers kick off in Montreal, and at that exact same time, the Bisons kick off at home against the Thunderbirds. It would be lovely if you could find a way to have a little more synergy between the local U Sports team and the CFL team, but I digress. In speaking to a spokesperson for the Bisons, I was told that for playoff games, U Sports teams have the choice of hosting the Friday night or the Saturday. And those are the 2 options. So presumably, if the Manitoba Bisons were to host a playoff game, we know they're hosting a playoff game next week when the Bombers could potentially be hosting the West semifinal on Saturday. Presumably, the Bisons would look to play that on the Friday night. And the same would be true for the following weekend, the second weekend of November. If the Bombers, for instance, are hosting the West Final, then the Bisons would look to play that game, if they're, of course, still in the playoffs at that point, on the Friday night. Now, the choice becomes, if there's, depending on the Bombers, let's say the Bombers end up not hosting the West Semi, well, then the Bisons can choose that Saturday, November 2nd, for their home game if they want to. Or alternatively, if, the Bombers are in fact, let's say, eliminated, then you obviously got the Bisons having the opportunity to say, we'll host on the Friday the 8th or November the 9th. I mean, you'd think with the weather, maybe you'd rather have a daytime game like a Saturday afternoon when it's a little bit warmer, but you never know. Mind you, if you're hosting UBC, who are used to practicing out on the West Coast, maybe you want to have a cold nighttime game if you're the Bisons.
Bring it on.
That's what I'm led to believe. A Friday night or a Saturday for those U Sports. And obviously, yes, the Bisons will have to work around the Bombers, depending, of course, on what happens this weekend.
Well, and let's get to this weekend now. I mean, the Bombers, took the briefest bye week possible and have been practicing since the weekend, getting ready for Montreal. And pretty clear that after missing their chance to clinch it last week against Toronto, they've got one more opportunity to punch their ticket directly to the CFL West final. But I think knowing that it's Calgary going into Saskatchewan on Saturday night, it's going to be up to them to get the job done with a win in Montreal, John.
Yeah, and I think this is a great opportunity for this team to get back on track and to flex a little bit. I mean, the defense was excellent this past week against the Toronto Argonauts. They came out flat-footed on that first drive. After that, they were sensational. Outside of a couple of Sergio Castillo misses, I thought the special teams was great, right? They got the fumble with Brian Cole, stripping Janarian Grant to the football, recovering that ball right down there inside the red zone. I believe it was the 9-yard line. I mean, the offense had to do a better job, obviously, of punching in those red zone opportunities when they came about. I had the stat in my post-game column. I think the Bombers were within Toronto's 40-yard line. I think it was 4 times, and they came away with 5 points, which is laughably few, right? You need to do a better job simply of converting those. But if you go all the way back to week 1, I mean, the Alouettes were the only team to really come into Princess Auto Stadium this week and put the Bombers over a barrel. They won 27-12 in what was easily Winnipeg's most one-sided loss at home this year. They went 6-3 at home. The other 2 losses coming by a combined 5 points to BC in week 3. And then, of course, Toronto this past week in a game, again, that they probably should have won. So it's interesting with the Alouettes, right? I mean, they looked awful, to be quite frank, in Vancouver this past week. Cody Fajardo did not practice for 2 weeks, given that his wife, Laura, just welcomed their second child. But then he played for some reason, and he looked really out of sorts. And then they brought in Davis Alexander. And again, against a BC Lions defense that hasn't been good for the second half of the season really at all, he struggled as well. And yes, they were resting Walter Fletcher, their running back, and they rested Austin Mack. But outside of that, this was essentially their starting group. And then Josh Dominic, their right tackle, rookie, who's been very good this season, went down and was on crutches right on the sideline. So this Alouettes team is trending down. Does that mean the Bombers can go into Percival Molson and coast? No, because this Alouettes team is still good. But I think if you're a Bomber fan looking for reasons for optimism heading into this week, there certainly are many if you're paying attention to the details.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, it's funny. I was talking with Hammer yesterday. And, he brought up the point, if they started Davis Alexander as opposed to Cody Fajardo, does that change their win probability that significantly? I mean, certainly Davis Alexander's been able to win games when he started so far this year. I'm more interested in Fletcher, in Mack, some of their other key players. And with the injury that you just mentioned last week, you do wonder whether Jason Moss just decides to better safe than sorry and sit down a bunch of those guys and just don't even get them on the field and let some of the backups play and play for the entire game, or knowing that they're going to be off again next week waiting for the East final. There is an element of rest versus rust and not wanting for guys to go 2 or 3 weeks without playing. I mean, do you have a read at all on how Moss is going to be handling the decisions he's got to make, knowing that regardless of what happens in this football game, they'll be hosting either Toronto or Ottawa on the 9th?
Well, the Alouettes are set to start their practice week later today. So we don't yet have any read, at least, on what's going on at practice with reports out of La Belle Provence. But I will say this about Cody Fajardo, at least. Since week 6, he has thrown 5 touchdown passes. This is somebody who was supposed to be the MOP of the league. And by the way, over the first 5 weeks, he threw 10. So he's got 5 since the second week of July, which is wild. And I don't think there's really any drop-off in this offense from Cody Fajardo to Davis Alexander, which I think will make for an interesting offseason. Of course, Cody Fajardo is under contract on an extension he signed not long after being the Grey Cup MVP last year. Davis Alexander, a pending free agent. You'd certainly imagine that the Alouettes do not want to lose a guy who could very well be the heir apparent there in Montreal. But getting back to the question about Jason Moss, I mean, here's the challenge in the CFL that I don't think a lot of people necessarily think about is the salary cap. Because if you sit a guy who's healthy, like say you decide we don't want Cody Fajardo to play this week, we want to make sure he's healthy for the East Final. Well, you put him on your 1-game injured list as a healthy scratch. You got to pay him his check, and it's going to count against the cap. And you're also going to now have to pay an additional player. Like they've got a former NFL quarterback on their practice roster by the name of James Morgan. If you promote Morgan, now he goes from a practice roster check to a game check. That's an increase of like $3,000 against your cap. And that's going to hit every single time you scratch somebody. So if you try to scratch 20 players, you're now paying 20 extra game checks. And you're doing that at a point of the season where you might have that space, or behind closed doors, you might be going, holy smokes, we could not be closer to the cap. This is dangerous territory. Or maybe they're pulling a BC Lions and saying, you know what, we don't really care what the cap is this year. We're all in on 2024. Let's just go over it. I don't know. I'm not privy to those details. But regardless, the point is it's tough to scratch a ton of guys late in the year. Interestingly, again, they didn't scratch many players last week. Maybe that's a hint from Jason Maas that they're looking to scratch a lot of guys this week. But you also mentioned, Huz, that with them sitting next week already, do you really want guys to not play 2 weeks in a row, especially given how badly they played in Vancouver in week 20? It's certainly an interesting challenge, and it's one that, the Toronto Argonauts had to deal with for the last third of last season. It's a challenge the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have had to face the last number of seasons late in the year. So it'll be interesting to see how Jason Maas and the Alouettes handle that challenge for sure.
Well, and of course, the Argos last year were somewhat of a cautionary tale. I mean, they, had the bye, they sat guys late in the season, and then Chad Kelly showed up and threw a million picks in the game. And that 16-2 season went up in smoke. From a Bomber perspective, though, I mean, it's very clear. The playoff starts on Saturday for Winnipeg in a lot of ways. Are they done if they lose? No. But I would argue that their ability to win the Grey Cup significantly increases if they get the job done. They don't have to play in the West Semi, and they have a home game. And we know what Princess Auto Stadium is like on any game, but especially considering what we expect the conditions to likely be in early to mid-November. There really is a lot on the line for Winnipeg, even though they've got an X beside their name and they know they're going to be playing a home game at Princess Auto Stadium.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's talk about, how the Bombers have stacked up against the Lions and Riders. I mean, Winnipeg won the season series 2-1 against both teams. So I think it's fair to suggest that Winnipeg's the best team out of the three, but these were extremely close fought games, at least certainly against the Riders. I mean, they played 3 games against each other, 2 in Regina, 1 in Winnipeg. The Riders held Brady Oliveira under 50 yards rushing in all 3 of those games. Zach Collaros had a really nice game on Labor Day until he was removed from the high hit from Miles Brown. Played okay right in the Banjo Bowl. Defensively, the Bombers were completely incapable of getting after Trevor Harris. I think you have to give credit to Trevor Harris for how quickly he was able to get rid of the ball in those games. But, it's a tough matchup for Winnipeg. I mean, these are 2 really close teams, and playing at home could easily be the difference in who ends up winning a playoff game between those 2, if, of course, they in fact meet next month. BC's a little bit of a different story. I mean, the Lions came in at the start of the season. VA and Alexander Hollins had a field day back in week 3. I think that was the game Alexander Hollins went over 200 yards. Won that game 26-24. The subsequent meetings were all Winnipeg. I mean, they stomped BC 25-0 in week 9, and then week 11 that was the Nathan Rourke game. They went into Vancouver and won 20-11. So I think if you're Winnipeg, you'd rather see BC, especially if the game's in Winnipeg, right? BC is a dome team, and I know that it upsets some people in BC when I say that because they say, well, we practice outside. We're not okay. You practice in Surrey. You practice in Surrey, BC. That is not the same as being an outdoor team. You're practicing in plus 15-degree weather every day, and it's beautiful on the West Coast, while Winnipeg and Saskatchewan are practicing at home in -5 with snow and wind. That's not the same as being an outdoor team. So my point is, I think the Bombers probably match up better against BC, especially if the game's in Winnipeg. That is, of course, the road Winnipeg took to their last 2 Grey Cup berths, hosting the West Final against the BC Lions and winning. If they're going to go back to the Grey Cup in 2024, that's probably their best bet. I don't think you want to go to Regina. Right? Saskatchewan is a tough place to play. That team is trending upwards. BC was trending downwards for a long time. They kind of fixed that, it seems, this past week with Vernon Adams Jr. at the helm. So I don't think you want to play both and go the West semifinal route. I think you want to go to the West final route, play a battered up and bruised team, whoever wins that semifinal.
Well, you know what? Just on that, John, before we go, it was really interesting to see how BC looked last week against Montreal, putting Vernon Adams in as the starter for the first time since Nathan Rourke came back. I mean, they looked a hell of a lot more like that team that was tearing up the league in the first 5-6 weeks of the season than the one that has been struggling for the better part of the last 2 months. Like, they had just got a full-fledged ass kicking in a very important game against Saskatchewan. Was it 39-8 the week before?
Yep.
How different, like, let's assume for a minute that good things happen for the Bombers this weekend, and it's a rematch of Saskatchewan and BC. And again, this is not a done deal, from far from it. I'm not jinxing it or anything. But do you think that BC with Vernon Adams, what we saw last week, could potentially go in and certainly give the Riders a much better game and potentially win based on what we saw from that one weekend, knowing what this team is capable with Vernon Adams? The energy level certainly seemed like it was off the charts compared to not so good in recent weeks.
Yeah, I've been saying for a month now, it's time to put Vernon Adams Jr. back in. And that doesn't mean that Nathan Rourke's not the future of the BC Lions, but I think Vernon Adams Jr. is the present. And as much as I'd been saying that for a month, they still played better than I thought they would. Like, I did not see them going from exactly as you laid out, that 31-point loss in Regina to a, almost 30-point win at home against Montreal. That being said, I mean, my colleague JC Abbott at 3 Down Nation has done a sensational job covering this story. He has a great column up on our website right now, where basically, he talked to Keon Hatcher about this, and he said, well, VA, was calling us out, saying, hey, look, at the start of this year, or in previous years, certainly with guys like Lucky Whitehead or Dominic Rhymes, like, after a big play, our offense would celebrate together. Like, receivers would be getting up and pounding their chests and high-fiving. And right now, when we make a big play, it like, nothing's going on. Like, there's no energy to this team. There's no fire, and we're playing flat. And in one game, he seemed to fully breathe that back into existence, right? He breathed life into a team that was playing like their season was over. And I think you have to give credit to Vernon Adams Jr. The other thing I'll say is this BC offense under Jordan Maksimic is better at attacking downfield through the passing game than any in the CFL. To do that, they rely heavily on timing. And when that timing is not perfect, that offense, like there's not a lot of room for error. Like, that offense either is on or it's off. It's not ever medium or tepid. It's either working or it's a disaster. For instance, we saw when the Winnipeg Blue Bombers shut out this team back on August 1st. Granted, VA didn't finish that game due to a knee injury, but we've seen this offense be unstoppable, and we've seen it be miserable. And Nathan Rourke, without the benefit of a training camp, without the benefit of a ton of practice reps, at least certainly before he started getting into the starting lineup, making his debut against Winnipeg back in mid-August, the timing was simply not there. And VA came in having not started a game, right, in essentially 3 months. And he was like, boom, this timing is down. I've been in this offense for 2 years. I had a full camp. I'm ready to go. So I do think that the Lions are a lot more threatening as a potential Grey Cup team now than they were a week ago. And all the more reason for the Bombers to get it done. I don't think you want to see both these teams in the playoffs. That makes your trip to the Grey Cup a lot tougher to secure. I would pick the Bombers to win the West Final against either of these teams. I'd be leery of them having to host the semi and then go on the road to Saskatchewan for the final. You do not want to play Vernon Adams Jr. in the playoffs if you can avoid it. You want to host that West Final and play whoever is left between BC and Saskatchewan.
Hey, just quick on the way out, Nick Taylor's coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a reflection of Brandon Alexander being hurt. I don't think you necessarily want a 36-year-old Nick Taylor in the starting lineup, but Nick Taylor is somebody who has the full confidence of this coaching staff. He's a guy who has played halfback, he's played safety, he's been around for a very long time in this league. So, and I think this is, again, I think actually Mike O'Shea in his media availability yesterday used the term insurance policy. I think that's a great way to describe this. Because I think the Bombers are sitting in their meeting rooms right now going, okay, if this player blows out their knee in week 21, what do we do? If this guy tears an Achilles in week 21, what do we do? And they're going, okay, we're not super confident in our backup options. We've got too many green guys there. We need somebody who's seen every picture and done everything on the defensive side of the ball, at least from a secondary perspective. So I like the addition of Nick Taylor. I think he'll be a valuable guy to have in the meeting room. You just don't want to have to, right? He's like that break glass in case of emergency. You don't want to break the glass and call on him, but you're glad that he's there in case something happens.
John, awesome conversation. Thank you so much for doing this. Fill people in on what you and the fellas have going on 3 Down Nation as we get into the final weekend of the regular season and get ready for CFL playoffs.
Well, I'm 7-0 on my last 7 picks against the spread. So it took me 18 weeks, but I think I've got the league figured out. So stay tuned for my picks this week. And something that's exciting is as teams are eliminated, we're already working on Hamilton, Calgary, and Edmonton. We will be publishing pending free agent lists for all 9 CFL teams. So if you're interested in seeing who is a pending free agent, whether it's in Winnipeg or elsewhere, we will exclusively be reporting that information as we do every year. And we're excited to bring that.
How is your record for the picks this year against the spread?
Against the spread, I think I am 10 over 500, maybe. I was a little over 500, and then my streak started. So I don't have the raw numbers, but they'll be published on 3 Down on Friday morning.
That is some good stuff. We have a season-long contest between myself, Remus, and all of the EST guys, and I think of the entire group, 3 of us were above 500. I think I was 8 above, and I went 3-0 last week as well. So we're coming down to this final week, and there's a lot on the line, certainly in a couple of the games right now. Hey, thank you again for the time, buddy.
It's been a tough season. You're very welcome. It's been a tough season for picks. I mean, it took me 5-6 weeks to get on the Ottawa bandwagon, and then as I started buying in, they stopped playing well. So it's been a tough year for picks. So good for you being that far over 500.
Let's have a great weekend, and we'll definitely have to catch up as we get ready for the playoffs. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks, Huss. Anytime.
John Hodge at John D. Hodge on X, and make sure you're checking out all of John and the rest of the 3 Down Nation's team work at 3downnation.com. We'll have more CFL talk on the Winnipeg Sports Talk channel tomorrow because, of course, CFL 110 will be back. Of course, CFL 110 is brought to you by our friends at Garage Living Winnipeg. Folks, the push is on. If you want to have a clean, organized garage this fall before the snow flies, now's the time to give Pat at Garage Living a call, 999-1234. It's been a very busy fall. As soon as the kids were back in school, the bikes, the football, the hockey equipment all over the garage, I think made some people realize there is a better way. And Garage Living has an innovative solution called Slatwall. Dozens of hooks, baskets, and shelves that clip into it to get everything off your floor. There's even a cool golf club caddy and tire racks to store those winter or summer tires. And you can do as much of it or as little of it as you want to fit within your budget. This is your chance to clear the clutter, organize and beautify your garage with Slatwall. Garage Living also offers polyaspartic floor coating, made in Canada premium metal cabinetry, for a total garage makeover. You can check out their amazing work and what they've done for other customers online at garageliving.com and give Pat Kanuga a call 204-999-1234 to book a free in-garage consultation or make an appointment to meet him in their showroom at 981 Main Street. Garage Living Winnipeg. Garages made for living. Folks, if you have a move coming up, make sure you get the white glove treatment on all of your precious valuables and belongings by using the most trusted name in moving in Manitoba, family owned for over 40 years. the great people over at Rollies. Rollies.com, as I mentioned, has an extensive logistics business, which means they're all over the city and province every single day, which means they can arrange flexible timing, routes, and give you a great price on that next move all at the same time. Check out their new revamped website at rollies.com. You can find out all about everything they can do for you. And in the top right corner, it says request an estimate. You let them know when and where you're moving, what you have to move, and use the promo code WST, by the way, for a special discount on moving services and moving supplies. And they'll turn it around with a great quote for you and get you on the move to your next destination. For your next move, make it Rollies. Find out more or request an estimate today online at rollies.com. Our friends at Consolidated Supply are finishing up just an amazing summer and fall and getting ready for next season. Of course, synonymous with the golf industry, Consolidated Supply is the go-to spot for irrigation services and supplies, but so much more. Want to put that dream putting green in the backyard or maybe artificial turf somewhere in your home? They're the leaders in artificial turf. And, of course, they're the club car dealer in Manitoba, so they've got incredible new and used golf cars as well as other club car vehicles, which you can see down at their showroom. While you're there, check out other great options for your property like hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchens. Not to mention, they are the leader in small engine parts and repair 24/7, 365. Pop by and see Consolidated Supply at their showroom, open to the public, 1395 Niagara Road East, or find out more online at cte.ca. And hey, a big congratulations again to our friends at Manitoba Battery, who just officially opened their second location now in the south side of the city on Dovercourt Drive, along with the original on Logan Avenue. Manitoba Battery is the place where you will get the best deals on batteries for literally everything. In the summer, it was for boats and campers and ATVs and all that fun stuff. Now we're getting ready for the Winnipeg winter, which means your car or truck battery needs to be good to go. If you've got needs or just want to pop in and get it tested, head down to one of the two Manitoba Battery locations. But if you do need a new battery, just give them a phone call or order online. They'll deliver it to you for free anywhere inside the city of Winnipeg for free with any purchase over $60. It's just that easy. Best price, shop local, best service, make it Manitoba Battery for all your battery needs at manitobabattery.com. All right, Ken's going to join us in a few minutes from St. Louis, but the morning skate has completed. The coach has spoken. So to tee up Ken's visit from St. Louis before a big Central Division battle tonight, let's hear from Jets head coach Scott Arneal right now on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Made some changes last year, and they were a pretty tough team to tough out last year. They made a run right to the end, and then obviously this year they're off to a good start. They work hard. They really do. They work hard. They come at you in waves. They're aggressive on the forecheck, and then they got some top end people: Kyrou, Thomas, Bushnevich, guys that can make plays, and so it'll be for us to start this road trip. We got to make sure that we're ready to go against that forecheck.
One change up front?
Yeah,
rotation
back in.
Okay.
Yep.
And then what about on D? What's your plan? It looks like Logan will stay.
Don't have a plan. I go
about?
game to game. I don't have a plan. So, yeah,
right.
I just kind of go as is. Wanted to make sure Stan came out of that one good, and he did. Kind of the idea of being an afternoon game, coming back here a day and a half later. So, I liked a lot of what he did. Good start.
When a guy is off for a while, what are the benefits to be able to get back and stack some games rather than maybe in, out?
Yeah, I wanted him to play at home. I wanted him to get one game at home before we came out on these games, and because you get like I said, St. Louis is a heavy forecheck team and they come hard, and so I wanted him to get that one game at home. It was good against Pittsburgh, and for him it's just once you get in the rhythm again, kind of him playing with Millsy, recognize his partner, how to play with him, what to do, how they kind of read off each other, and just like you mentioned, you get to go right back at it quickly. That you continue to build on what you've done.
Just in terms of how things have kind of evolved as the season goes, right? You get 5 games in, and I think you mentioned after the Pittsburgh game, you saw a little bit of an adjustment on their PK. Is there a certain amount of time that you really start to see those adjustments? Like you guys change your power play a little bit. Now you're starting to see some of the adjustments that other teams have made.
Yeah, that's a coaching in this league. They're not going to give you freebies if you're getting away with something. They're going to try to close off that avenue, whatever it might be, 5-on-5, whether it's your breakouts, whether it's what you're doing in the offensive zone, specialty teams. Coaching's too good in this league. Then it's just they're going to get ready to jump on something that maybe you're having success with to make sure that it's not a part of the the equation as we do. So that's just something that the adjustments that you have to kind of be prepared for, and kind of whether that's shift to shift or maybe at the end of a period you make a change or make a switch to something. That's kind of just how it evolves through the game.
You've talked a lot about Dylan Sandberg. I mean, how do you know when a guy's ready? Is it just a sink or swim, or how do you know when a guy's ready for more responsibility?
I'm a little bit old school. I think that you build gradually. Sometimes you overload and you throw guys into situations. Some guys can handle it. The elite guys, more than likely have handled it. But the problem is if it doesn't have success and they stumble, and it's hard to now you got to start all over again. I like the fact that Sammy started with the Moose, built his way up here. He's had 2 years of growing as a player, finding his game, finding his niche, what he's really good at, making sure he's doing that every night, and now taking on the next step. Now the next step is, he's in against the top 4 every night. He's playing against some elite talent and continuing to do those things to grow, and like a lot of what I've seen so far. But it'll be, it's 82 games that he's got to continue to do it. But that growth that he's shown the last couple of years has really helped him kind of step forward.
And then when you're, like you said, when you're on the ice 5 minutes more a game, there's chances for good plays, but there's also, when you're out against the top 6, there's also opportunity for mistakes. I mean, he certainly seemed to handle those minutes pretty well. So
and that's part of the growing curve, is that you're going to make mistakes. Things happen, especially on being a defenseman. You can't worry about what just happened because you got another one coming. Next shift again, Kyrie's coming over the boards, Thomas is coming over the boards, Bisonet's coming over the boards. You can't worry about what you just did. You got to go to the next one, because making sure the next one doesn't happen and build off it. And that's part of the growth of any young player, is that you're going to make mistakes, but obviously we don't want to continue to do that. But it's just learn it from it, move on, get on to the next play, get on to the next shift.
And you talked about his hockey sense the other day. We always talk about forwards and hockey sense. How come we don't talk about defense more? And what is it about his hockey sense that stands out?
I just think that's anybody at this level that's playing defense in the NHL. You have to have instincts. You have to be able to read plays. They read the rushes all the time, right? They're, whether it's, and like I said yesterday, J-Mo reading it offensively, finding a hole, finding a forward that's maybe not paying attention to where he is and diving through, or jumping in the rush from out of our end. With our defenders, our guys that are great at it, they have the ability to close off ice extremely quick. He may do it 5 times in a shift, where he's got off the wall on a rush and he's closed off space and the guy isn't an option, or it's in the corner, it gets close to the guy that he can't get the puck back on a cycle or whatever it might be. But the other night was a great read and anticipating where that pass was going. So I think NHL defensemen, they have ability to read the ice. The good ones have a really high IQ on recognizing what the next play is.
For the Central Division as a whole right now, just how difficult is this division, and do you have to play a certain style in order to have success in this division?
Yeah, well, you're going to see each other a lot, and, so there's sort of the rivalry that kind of builds itself up. There's always a little bit of extra push against these guys, but it's amazing that, you look at where we are. We've had a great start, but we got everybody sitting right in the pack. We're all tight together, which it'll be all year long. We've got good teams, and it's not like there's a weak sister in this division. Everybody's coming, and it makes us also be prepared every time we come into this building, or we get divisional opponents at home. You got to be at your best.
All right, so there's Jets head coach Scott Arneal. One lineup change today. Gus out. Rasmus Kupari back in. No change on the blue line. Hayden Fleury will sit for a second consecutive game, and Logan Stanley, who came off injury to play his first game of the regular season Sunday afternoon against Pittsburgh, is back in again with Colin Miller on that third pairing. Some nice words for Dylan Sandberg there from the coach. He, of course, and Neil Pionk will be playing some big minutes tonight. Of course, the Jets' top pairing of Josh Morrissey and Dylan DeMello stays intact. Expecting Weber to pop in just a couple minutes, but while we've got another couple, let's hear from Vlad Namestnikov. Vlad, of course, had that monster Friday along with Cole Perfetti and Nikolai Ehlers after a slower start for that line. Here's what Vlad had to say before a big divisional matchup against St. Louis.
Well, Vladdy, I don't know if it's just the Central Division being the Central Division, but you guys come out 5-0 and you got about 3 other teams around you still in the standings. Does that just kind of sum up what life's been like in this division? I mean, ever since you came to the Winnipeg Jets?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of good teams in the division, a lot of tough matchups. So, but we just got to take one game at a time, kind of focus on St. Louis today, and go from there.
You look at St. Louis, a team that's a little bit different than they were last year. Additions of Holloway and Broberg, obviously, but just in terms of what you've seen from them over the last couple of years, you guys had success against St. Louis last year. What stands out to you?
Yeah, they're always a well-structured team. They're fast. I think they added some speed. So, as I said, we gotta stick to our game, focus on the Winnipeg Jet hockey that we can bring, and just play our game.
Talking about your game, obviously 5-0, great start, and last game against Pittsburgh, a lot of the guys talked about how the second period, not exactly what they liked off the start, but by the end of the period, you guys are up 3-2. What do you think you guys did well to change the flow of that period in the middle frame?
I thought we were giving up a lot of D-zone time. We were kind of turning pucks over in our zone, and I think we cleaned that up in the third period and got pucks deep and didn't really let them play in our zone. So I think we got to do more of that, and it'll be good.
Your experience in the National Hockey League, how many games is it into the season where you start to see teams maybe adjusting to whether it's tweaks on the power play or tweaks on penalty kill, so that you start to go up against something a little bit different?
It's hard to say how many games, probably maybe 10, 20. When everything kind of starts settling down, guys are more settled into their structures. So, it definitely takes a little bit of time.
And lastly, I don't know if there's any specific key, but you obviously had a lot of success at home on that 4-game homestand, little run on the road here. What's the key to bringing that momentum right here on the road? Is it just kind of handling your business on day one? Yeah,
I think, as I said, nothing changes for us. We just have to play that really responsible in our D zone and take it to offense and tire them out in their zone. So I think we did that for the 5 games at home, and just got to take it on the road now.
All right, there's Vlad Namestnikov. Big goal on Sunday, offensive explosion on Friday, and they'll look to keep it rolling tonight in St. Louis. And speaking of St. Louis, that is where we go to now to welcome in a well-hydrated Ken Weeb, who, if I know Ken, is either in a hotel room or potentially the Marriott Lounge somewhere at the hotel that he's staying with right now. Let's welcome Kenny in. Weber, what's going on? Hold on a sec. I can't hear you right now. Can you hear me?
Oh, how about I unmute it there? Sorry about that. Yes.
There we go. Now we're in business.
Hotel Magnolia. Good to see you, Andrew. Good to see you. No lounge at the Hotel Magnolia. It's the autograph collection here. But good to be back in St. Louis. Been a couple of years for me. Spent a lot of time here in 2019 covering the first 2 rounds, obviously the Jets versus Blues, but then that epic 7-gamer with the Blues and Stars. And yeah, I mean, first time, I don't know if I've been here since COVID or not, to be quite frank, Huss, but fun to be back in the rink. Good vibes around both teams. Big news for the Blues here with the extension for Jake Neighbors. There will be no retaliatory offer sheets headed his way, at least. There, who knows what the summer will bring on that front. And I don't think it'll be Kevin Lowe versus Brian Burke in a barn somewhere. But anyways, that was their news. And Jets obviously feeling good about their start, but knowing there's going to be a fun battle here. And us, I don't know how much you dug into the numbers. We know last year the Jets swept the Blues, but they've won 9 of the last 11 meetings. But as we know, that accounts to a whole bunch of nothing except something for us to talk about going into this one here tonight.
Yeah, listen, I mean, they handled the Blues every time they played them last year, and that was a big reason why they finished where they did. But that was last year, and this is this. Now, to the Jets' credit, they've had a great start so far and are 5-0. And really look to build off a heck of a weekend. It just quickly, before we dive into tonight, Ken, I mean, you covered this team for a long time. That was a really special weekend. And listen, the team did their part, scoring 14 goals. I mean, the power play's on fire, number 1 in the league. But man, kind of in the season, just appreciating what Connor Hellebuck has brought with the Hellebuck night and the trophies in the house, and then following that up with Brian Little, and everything about the Brian Little day was, I think, perfect, especially with the fans waiting till the third period then to kind of get our little jab in at Rucker McGroarty. Hard to imagine that weekend being much more better for the team that is now the only team without a blemish on its record heading into tonight.
Yeah, the on ice was interesting, Huss, right? Because the Jets obviously, they were looking to, attack the Sharks who had played the night before and ran up the score a little bit. Even though the funny thing, not funny, but the odd part is that they allowed 3 goals there, and then obviously falling behind against Pittsburgh, and it sounded even silly to write in our game day newsletter today, Huss, but the Jets are looking to tighten up a bit defensively. Allowing 3 a night is a little bit abnormal, but it's just more that they only gave up the 2 in the first 3 games, and all of a sudden they gave up 6 on the weekend. But, when you score 14, giving up 6 is not a whole lot. But it was more, you touched on it, and I'm glad we get to talk about Brian Little a little bit more. My trip to the buffet was a little bit too long last week that we didn't really talk about him much. But as someone who covered Brian since the day he came over from Atlanta to the day he played his last game, and, even tried, so hard to make that comeback, I thought it was awesome. I know some other teams have done the whole final shift thing, and I guess it was maybe just unexpected for me when I first noticed that they have the TSN camera in the room, and I had no idea. There was no inkling that Brian would be going out for the reverse rookie hot lap there. But you see Brian Little, walking through the fist bump line. And then the second thing you notice, he's in skates. Oh, well, he's wearing a jersey. Oh, wait, he's actually in full gear. Cool for him to go out. And, for an athlete, and, we kind of talked about it with Brian after the press conference. I mean, being a hockey player is such a big part of a pro athlete's identity that, just the way the game was taken away from him, Huss, I think there must be, a huge part of Brian that just wanted, not wanted, but when you hear that roar for one more time, he would have got an ovation anyway. But I think for him, coming out of the tunnel for one more time, I think it would have been really special for him, given all that he went through and trying to work his way back into his playing time, or, when he had to finally retire. And I know you heard the clips. I love how emotional Brian was when talking about that decision, and you're just hoping that one doctor says it's not going to be damaging for your health, and when you don't find that, you come to a really stark realization that it's over. That part of your life is over. No matter whether you get involved, in any other capacity down the road. So. I love that he shared. It was just prototypical Brian Little, smile on his face when he came out on the ice, not afraid to feel his emotions when he looked up on the scoreboard and saw some of the crazy highlights. And you got to think that your blood is absolutely pumping when you see the goal at the Heritage Classic at Mosaic, when you see an overtime, or when you see a goal in the rousing comeback against the Nashville Predators, when you see yourself on the ice in that first playoff series against the Anaheim Ducks. I just thought it was really special for Brian, and he's just such a good person, Huss, and for him to be able to feel that. And for him to be so appreciative of the moment, and, thanking us for, our time covering him when it was really the other way around, us actually thanking him for being such a, the conscience of the team and being available and being such a pro and a classy individual. I just thought it was a really special Sunday afternoon for sure.
No, it was. And listen, it at one point it was 2-0 for Pittsburgh after a pretty good first period. Yeah. I mean, it was not that way. And now listen, many people, not me, many people are saying that it was those heartfelt messages from season ticket members that actually turned the game around. But it may have actually been what Scott Arneal had to say to his troops during one of those. I was sort of the first
the
time
friendly
we've seen
reminders
Arnie.
house.
Yeah, that was the first time we've seen Arnie. And listen, things have been going really well so far this year. We hadn't got to that point, but I'm just interested in your takeaway from that game, how it turned, and what we saw from the head coach with a little bit of P&V for his squad that was not quite where he obviously wanted them to be at that point in the hockey game.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go to that well very often, and you always hear the horse racing analogy. You can't crack the whip too often, but I do think it's in the delivery. And Scott's not a ranting and raving type of person. He's a guy that definitely is very intense and focused. But I just thought there were some things that he was just those friendly reminders were important in the game. And again, how the game turned. Well, it turned with Nikolai Ehlers' artistry, Huss, in that game, and then. After that, first you have the beautiful 6-on-5 goal after he drew the initial delayed penalty, or would have drawn the delayed penalty, but then makes such a dancing around, beautiful move, opens up the lane, perfect pass, one-timer, Kyle Connor. And then the play on the 4-on-4 is an underrated one, Huss, and it didn't come without risk, because if Ehlers doesn't win that puck battle along the wall, it's pretty good chance it's going to be a 2-on-1 going the other way. And again, the game could have changed, but Ehlers made such a great play to seal the wall that the defender wasn't available to chip it past him. And then he made just a brilliant pass to Vladislav Namestnikov for the backdoor tap in. Ehlers really helped get the Jets going. And then Huss, quite frankly, after the Jets gave up the tying goal to start the third, blunt force trauma, from the third line. Basically, they took over the contest, and in a game where they had a really, it's a tough matchup when you're going up against Sidney Crosby and company. But if you want to go up and win that matchup, you force that line to play in their defensive zone for the majority of the period and, a good chunk of the game. And that was an impressive thing. And again, too, Mark Scheifele getting to the net, really good play there. A lot of good things from the Jets on that night in the rally, but they kind of went to sleep for the first time this year in that second period, and they were very flat for an extended period of time, which is probably why Scott shared a few messages and subtle reminders for his group. But the response is there. I mean, Huss, 5-0 is a very impressive start, and it's hard to go 5-0 for any team in the league. Teams are gunning for you, but the biggest concern for Scott would have been the high danger chances allowed. I think it was 18 at 5-on-5 in the game, according to Natural Stat Trick, and 21 in all situations. And Huss, for a team that had basically thrown a blanket around their opponent for the better part of the first three games for sure, and then a good chunk of the fourth, that I think that looseness was sort of unexpected and quite frankly uncharacteristic. So I think that the Jets got back, and they're going to want to get back, as Mason Appleton talked about after the game. This is a team that wants to win games 2-1 and 3-2. It's nice to win the odd one 6-3 or 6-5, as he talked about, but this team's identity is a sound defensive team that can score, and they need to get back to that on this road trip if they want to continue their success.
Well, they'll want to start it off right. It's a funny, and I guess on this entire road trip, we joked. I mean, hopefully, we don't hear too much about time zones from the current coach like we did the old coach. But you're all over the place. I mean, St. Louis, then to Seattle, then to Calgary. I hope you have the proper time that you need to be everywhere on it. Joking aside, though, tonight this is a game. I mean, listen, whatever happened last year. They're 0-0 right now, 5-0 on the season. But St. Louis has kind of quietly had a pretty nice start for a team that, as you said, I think a lot of people think have the talent to be a team that can contend for a playoff spot. And they're going to be up for the team that, you look up is at the top of the Central Division.
For sure, Huss, and the Blues are interesting, right? I mean, Doug Armstrong challenged this group right from the time that Alex Steen was named the next general manager of the Blues this past summer, right? He said, this is a retool or whatever word you want to use, and basically saying that if this group that it's integrating a lot of new pieces, and if they want him to go out and add rather than subtract players at the deadline, they're going to have to show him that they're a playoff team, right? So I love that about Doug. He's a quite frank individual, and the team has responded. This is what you want to see from a team that gets challenged from its general manager. And they've got a few interesting pieces and new parts. And, some of the old players are back playing important roles. They're integrating guys like Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway from the offer sheets. And the Joseph brothers are playing, one on the back end, one up front on that sort of identity line with Braden Shen. I think they're an interesting team. I mean, Joel Hofer won't play today, Huss, which is, I mean, kind of unfortunate for Manitobans. Had a chance to just say hello to him in the room before the game, but it's going to be a classic matchup, Jordan Binnington versus Connor Hellebuck in the game. We know that Jets fans occasionally don't mind getting under the skin of Binnington, and Binnington has been known to take the odd swipe at a Jets player who hangs out around the crease. So I think it'll be interesting. Obviously, this is a team that's got new head coach, had the interim tag dropped in Drew Bannister. Lots of respect for both of the organizations. And it's from the sounds of things, Jordan Kyrou, great start for the Blues, but, kind of quiet the last 3 games. He put up 6 in the first 3 and none in the last 3. Robert Thomas is a guy who's, taking on a first line role and a guy that needs to get going a little bit more as well. And Philip Broberg's had a great start, Huss. I mean, a point in each of the games, I think 6 points in 5 games. Set up the winner the other day when Joel Hofer had the classic or the rare shutout an assist on the overtime winner the other day in the 1-0 game with the Islanders. Pretty impressive stuff. He's been great out of the gate, and it'll be a tough matchup. I mean, even in sweeping the series last year, it's not like the Jets are dusting these guys 5-1 in most of their games. So I expect them to be ready. We know I'm sure you talked about it. Kapari is in. Logan Stanley is back in or for a second consecutive game. I know a lot of people up in arms over various iterations of the lineup here, but the Jets are obviously going to be playing Logan Stanley a bit, Huss. I mean, they've committed to him, they've invested in him, and again, I don't know why people expected him to. I don't know what they expected from a guy who played 1 preseason game. There are going to be mistakes that are made in the game. I mean, even if you played in every game, there are going to be mistakes. So of course Logan's looking to, play a little better. I thought he looked comfortable at times, but certainly I thought he got caught flat-footed on the Eller goal. Just his gap control, he just lost his gap for that split second. And the NHL, sometimes that's all it takes, Huss. And obviously before the Miller penalty, I thought that there was a bit of a tough pass in the feet, and that sort of extended the shift there where the Jets should have had a clean exit. They end up taking a penalty, and it ends up leading to that Kevin Hayes power play marker. But I mean, Logan Stanley is a guy who he's had lots of opportunity. We know that, but the Jets view him as part of the future still, and they're certainly going to give him some runway here to see what's going to happen. Again, I would just put it this way. I really like the way that Hayden Fleury played for the majority of the first 4 games he was in. But think of Hayden Fleury in the Kyle Capobianco spot right now. Though I expect him to play more than Capobianco did, he's got to be a guy who comes in when he gets his opportunity, plays well, and continues to show that he is deserving of more playing time. I think that I know you played the clips. I tried to get a sense of where Scott Arneal was going, whether it would be a true rotation. He just basically said it's going to be game to game, but I expect we'll see both Stanley and Hayden Fleury on this road trip. And in a lot of ways, they're completely different players, but they're top, first round picks that are still sort of looking to become full-time NHL regulars. So that's part of the gig right now when you're in the battle for the number 6 job. And what you can do to separate yourself from the competition is what will mean meriting additional playing time.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you. I mean, I think that the stakes are sort of high for Stan. I mean, listen, he's going to be on the team,
no doubt,
but like right now, like with Fleury coming in and playing the way that he did for the first 4 games, it was very, very evident that they have a very competent, capable defenseman that they can throw in there. He can play with Colin Miller and can hold his own. And didn't really make. I mean, the thing about with Stanley is that just sometimes if he's out of position, sometimes there's mistakes that ended up creating some scoring chances. We didn't see a lot of that from Fleury. I saw some of that in the preseason, but to be honest, since he's been in and started the regular season, he's been quiet, he's been competent, he's been good, and Scott Arneal said as much. I mean, hoping that Ville Heinola gets healthy at some point in hopefully the near future, but at some point, Billy's going to be given an opportunity as well. So to me, this is the time. If Stan wants to put himself in that conversation for regular minutes or being a guy that, could potentially be the number 6 when in big games later on this season in the playoffs, Like right now is the time for him to make the most of these chances. And you don't know how many they'll come because, as they say, they've got a guy in Fleury that they could easily go back to in the next game. And of course, Ville right around the corner. So listen, I know he signed a 2-year deal and he signed for next year as well, but I think we're a lot closer to some decision-making as to the true hierarchy of the blue line. We know what the top 5 is right now, but there's 3 guys that, when healthy, are going to be battling for that 6th spot. And you don't know when more opportunities are going to be coming. And I'd imagine Logan is well aware of that and how precious these opportunities to play are right now.
Yeah, no doubt, Husson. I mean, it wasn't an accident, when Scott Arneal was asked what he wants to see from Logan Stanley. I mean, we saw it in short bursts last year. Logan had to wait so long before he got into action. And when he sort of took the job from Nate Schmidt late in the year, at least took the job temporarily, he was providing a lot of those elements. Like, what do we talk about when the Jets defense core all the time? Too much of the same. Well, I know people make fun of the size and everything else, but I mean, Logan, when he is engaged physically, he has a certain skill set that the Jets don't have an abundance of on the back end. Especially now that Brendan Dillon is gone. So yes, they got a bunch of guys that are tenacious, but they don't have a lot of guys that are big and physical and, occasionally willing to drop the gloves. And when you're leaning on a guy, like, that's the thing. When Logan is physical and clears the front of the net, he can be a pretty effective player. But it's a lot to me, again, and not saying it's the same skill set because they're different players also, but Ben Sherratt, when, he brought that element of edge and meanness, like, if you're an opponent, you don't want to hang around the blue paint when when you're getting a cross check from, Brendan Dillon and Ben Sherratt and some of those other guys. So again, Logan has some offensive upside to his game, gets a shot through often, which is something we've seen over the years. And, when he's on his game, his exits are crisp. So, but the big thing for him, he needs to be a physical presence if he wants to win that job. Otherwise, there are other guys that bring other elements to the game in terms of, quicker exits and maybe a little bit more mobility with both Heinola and Fleury. So you're going to have to bring that element that the Jets have been lacking. Now, he's brought it in spurts before, but Logan himself said at Huss last week when he talked to the reporters, he needs to be more consistent. And if he can be now I'm not saying he has to be a punishing bruiser each and every shift, but he does have to bring that physical element in addition to having the puck skills to be a regular in that lineup. And yes, we know the Jets traded up to get him and everything else, but eventually a lot of that goodwill, eventually it's going to go to the player that is playing the best at the time. So right now, Logan Stanley has the opportunity to sort of try to make a claim for that spot. And then, like you said, soon enough, he's going to have competition from at least 2 guys. And I'm not taking Dylan Coghlan out of the competition. I'm just, right now he hasn't got into a game and he sort of moved into the 8th spot. He was in the 7th spot when Stanley was on the shelf, but he's in the 8th spot now. And soon there's going to be even more competition for that. And Huss, I know a lot of people have asked about the whole Jets getting down to 22 players, right? Like, if you're the Jets, I don't think you can risk trying just to get down to 22 to save a little bit of money in the accruing side. I don't know that you want to risk exposing Coghlan. And again, who knows if he would clear. Most likely people would say if a team gets an injury or whatever else, all of a sudden Coghlan gets claimed and then Stanley, re-injures himself or there's an injury somewhere else. Now all of a sudden there's another dent to the defensive depth. And I just think it's, a smarter play in the term for the Jets to be carrying 8, and then they'll sort of see what happens as they get back from this road trip and maybe go on the road for that next one after the one-off with the Maple Leafs. But I don't expect them to be going, trimming down the roster or having that exposure to waivers until we get a little better indication that, Logan Stanley is in the clear from the knee ailment that knocked him out of the good chunk of training camp.
Yeah, well, I mean, imagine if he's playing backto-back games, they're pretty confident that he's out of the woods. And
I mean, they're confident. Well. I just don't. Yes, I just mean that you can't, all of a sudden something, strange happens in the game 3 after you've exposed the player. It's not like you could pull him on after he's already been put on. So, anyways, I just think it'll be a little bit longer before they start worrying about getting down to 22-man roster.
I do think, regardless of the 22-man roster, Coughlin's going to be on the waiver wire at some point. I mean, when Ville Heinola is cleared, presumably he's 10th on the depth chart of their 10 defensemen. I would say. I mean, there's no way Ville Heinola gets put on waivers. I don't think they would consider putting Stanley on it. Fleury is that next guy. I mean, both of those guys were guys that were brought in to be sort of those insurance pieces. And, you know, as guys get hurt around the league, there always is that possibility. But, you know, unlike before where they could just simply, okay, Ville, your waiver's exempt, go play with the Moose. And, you know, if there's a spot, we'll get you. And then that wasn't the case last year. He had made the team and he got hurt, missed the first half of the year and wasn't there. But, you know, they'll be somewhat crowded, but listen, it's good to, you know, have depth at that blue line position. And listen, if some team ended up claiming Coughlin, I mean, it's sort of easy come, easy go. You pick a guy up on a 1-year deal in the offseason. And, you know, if there's a spot for him to play in the National Hockey League when he's not going to play here, that's why the waiver system was invented. And, you know, it's in the interest of the players to go for it. But I really see with the early start of Fleury, I think he's very much in the mix. And both Ville and Stan, when they do get games, are going to have the opportunity to prove to the coaching staff that they're the best choice of those guys to play alongside Miller, you know, assuming that the rest of the top four is set up. As far
Sorry,
as
just
the
let
forward-
me just
yeah, sure.
I just want to put a bow on that. All I mean, Huss, is that until Heinola is healthy enough to be part of the mix, there's just no benefit to get, you know, to exposing that extra player to waivers, just to, you know,
Agreed.
cap save a couple $100,000, you know, for March. I think they'll have plenty of time to do the accruing. I just think that they're going to be patient until, you know, Heinola is back, or at least Stanley's played more than 2 games before they start thinking about that. That's all.
And the only other thing that I'll say, if Coughlin, because Coughlin's the right side guy, right? So, I mean, to me,
Yes,
you know,
that's
if
the
you're
other thing.
looking right now, he's sort of the 4th right shot defenseman. And then you've got the other guys that are on the left side. And if something were to happen to Neil Pionk, for instance, well, in all likelihood, Colin Miller's probably moving up. And I think that's when we'd see Coughlin on the right side. If he were out of the mix, and then all of a sudden they had a need, they do have Elias Salmonson. Now, that might be earlier than the organization was planning, but there's a long list of players that got their first chance, not because that was when it was scheduled, but because somebody got hurt. Up at front, though, Kupari's back in for Gus for 1 game. How do you see that differently than what they're doing with the blue line, keeping Stanley in, but Kupari now in for Gustafsson after he got his first game of the year?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, Huss, the big similarity there would be that Kupari actually was quite solid through his first 4 games also, right? Much like Fleury. This wasn't a punishment to Kupari saying, I need you to be better, you know, coming from the head coach, but it was more of a, you know, you don't want David Gustafsson to have to wait, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games before it's in there. I think Gus was steady on Sunday. I mean, not, you know, by his own admission, and yesterday that I read, you know, he wasn't super happy with how it went, but I don't think he did anything to hurt his chances, but he didn't necessarily separate himself either. And I mean, obviously we've talked about this for a long time, even though Gustafsson has improved his skating in the last 2 years. I mean, Kupari has an edge when it comes to the speed factor. You know, on the other side of things, David is a more sound defensive player. But I mean, Huss, you and I have also talked about the, you know, face-offs. We don't, you know, we're not putting all kinds of crazy stock on it. But, you know, Gustafsson, I think, was only 30%, three wins, 7 losses out of his 10 draws. So, I mean, if you're looking at those sort of players on the periphery, you know, you want to, if you're David Gustafsson, you want to be 55 rather than, or even 50 rather than 30% on that night. But I think that, again, I'm not saying it's not a platoon situation, but right now Kupari has the edge. He's played well enough, and you know, his ability to bring a little bit more speed to that 4th line, plus you know his improvement in the faceoffs has been evident too. But I think that those two are definitely in a battle. And Huss, I mean, we know this. I mean, there's capable 4A players that with experience at the Moose level, and there's a couple other, you know, guys on ELCs that would like to be knocking on the door soon enough. So I don't think that the competitive juices are going to be waning anytime soon. It's good for an organization to have people battling for playing time at both positions, whether it's the Manitoba Moose or Winnipeg Jets. So you know, again, if Kupari falters, you could see more of Gustafsson, but right now I think David's just sort of in a rotationary phase. But and even though David can play the wing also, like neither Morgan Barron or Alex Iafallo have done anything that would suggest that they'll somehow start to be part of the rotation line. I don't think it's not a Kupari versus Gustafsson, but I don't think it's going to be a just rotate people through situation either or scenario. So I mean, right now David is the 13th forward, and the next opportunity he gets, whether through regular opportunity or injury, he's going to have to do something to differentiate himself from the competition, right? I mean, that's just basically how this works. I mean, the Jets love the player, but right now he's number 13, and again, the injury that he sustained late in the preseason kind of hurt his chances, and the player that came in did a good job when David was not there. So it just sort of try to be as patient as possible. And David said it himself too. Now, it's not like he's 21, 22 years old going through this for the first time. You have some experience, you got to just focus on your own game, work to your strengths. And when you get a chance, you better capitalize, because you just don't know how many opportunities there are going to be for you to establish yourself as an NHL regular.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, you don't want to be a bag skate and popcorn specialist for your entire career. And, much like we said with Stanley, and I think maybe even more so from how much Arneal really has, I mean, he sort of telegraphed this early on in training camp, and it was a little bit of a surprise to me. But then Kupari goes out, scores in the first game, has looked good at times. And, listen, like, he doesn't have world-class hands. I think we can all agree that, but I'll tell you what, he finds himself in positions where he's getting chances, and that speed is something that is in high demand right now in the National Hockey League. So he's making the most of his chance, and Gus is going to have to do the same thing when he does get in. Hey, you want to touch on that?
Just one quick one on Kupari. Like today, during the morning skate, another classic. He goes out wide, blows around the defenseman, goes bar down. Like it just doesn't do that with consistency in terms of he doesn't have an easy finishing ability, but every now and then when he shows some confidence, whether it's in practice or, like the goalie scored, I guess the goalie scored in the game is more of a beauty setup and a nice offside one-timer, but there are times in practice where he just sort of makes a move that was like, whoa, like it. I mean, again, I hate to say Ehlers-esque because it'll make the chat room go wild, but there are times in practice where he does something that makes you see why talent evaluators said this guy's a first-round draft pick with, a lot of tools in the toolkit.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, world-class speed, a few less shots right directly into the logo of the goaltender would be nice. But, hey, he's got one on the board so far this year, and if he can take what he's apparently doing in practice to the games, that's a good thing for the Winnipeg Jets, and certainly a good thing for him wanting to stay in the lineup. Ken, before we go, thoughts on Nikolai Ehlers? I really thought that he was the catalyst of both wins on the weekend. We're not talking about that line not getting anything going, far from it, after the last weekend. And I don't want to turn this into a conversation about his future, because honestly, that is somewhat of a cloud hanging over the club. We could talk about it every single day. But just right now, what did you see from Ehlers? How impactful he was to those two wins for the club, and his game right now as this team looks to continue their great start into St. Louis and on this road trip?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I love Nikolai Ehlers' honesty on last Friday before getting things going. I mean, he gave a really thoughtful answer when I asked him about, his assessment. I said, he said Scott Arneal felt that line had shown some progress over the first 3 games. And he said, yeah, I see it too, but we need more. Like, I love the fact that Nikolai, I mean, we've always talked about his ability to assess and, hand out personal grades and everything else. And, Nikolai had 2 assists before that time. One of them was on the 6-on-5 goal where he had the nice low pad shot, and Mark Scheifele found the rebound. And the other one was the perfect slap pass to Scheifele, but that was on the power play. Nikolai knew their line needed to be better at 5-on-5, but instead of, getting defensive or whatever else, he pointed out the things that they had been working on during that 4-day break. Sometimes their spacing wasn't good enough. They weren't supporting the puck well enough on most occasions. And then there were other times that when you go a long stretch, when you're not supporting the puck well enough, now all of a sudden you have too much support in right places. And it sort of would hinder their ability to generate a bunch of quality scoring chances for those first 3 games at 5-on-5. So, again, we know some of their damage came on the power play on the Friday night game against the Sharks, but they also looked really good at 5-on-5, Huss. I thought that their spacing was excellent. And again, the players knew exactly what they needed to do better. They just went out and did it.
When Perfetti was on
it.
the ice, 21 shot attempts, 4-0 against.
Right,
Like
that's what I mean. So those
that
guys
line
knew
lived
what.
in the other end, and that's usually
Right.
We're usually saying that's the Adam Lowry line.
Yeah, for sure. And I like that about them. I think that they were a little less effective on Sunday in terms of their 5-on-5 play. But I love the way that they played in that game. Perfetti obviously showing some confidence. Yes, both goals for him came on the power. I loved how that line played on Friday night. I think it was a huge boost for them emotionally. Again, we were saying it from the beginning. The same way you don't overreact over the 3-game sample size, you don't overreact over the blowout win or the 5th game that followed. But it was my reminder that, I went on your show last Friday, Huss, and I talked about maybe it was Thursday, the importance of them just being solid and trusting themselves and knowing that they've had success before and that they can have it again as long as you do the things on the ice that you need to do in order to have success, given the skill sets that they play with. But again, I think the whole narrative about Vladislav Namestnikov isn't skilled enough to be on the second line. Well, how do you feel about 5 points in the last 2 games if you're watching the Winnipeg Jets, Huss, right? I mean, again, you can say whatever you want about the level of competition, but I mean, Vladislav Namestnikov has a lot of different skills that he brings to the table. But let's not forget that he was also a first-round draft pick and came into the league as a skilled player also, even though his role has morphed and evolved over the course of the years. So the other thing too, Huss, I mean, I think that there's a few guys on the Jets that aren't really cooking as much as we maybe expected them to be at 5-on-5. And the beauty of what they've done so far is that almost every night, at least 3 of the 4 lines have been going. And on the nights that other 4th line hasn't been going, the special teams have either picked them up or they've gotten a goal at 6-on-5. 3 goals at 6-on-5 through 5 games is ludicrous. One of them's on a face-off play, one of them's on a delayed penalty, one of them's on a natural goalie pull. But and again, what they've been able to do at 4-on-4 is something that the Jets have really. We've seen a lot over the years, whether it was, Morrissey and Scheifele and Kyle Connor getting things cooking. But man, you better be careful on the coincidental minor side because, Nikolai Ehlers can also get a lot of things done with that extra space on the ice, Huss. So again, I think they're doing a lot of things well. There's always going to be room for improvement this early in the year. Some trends are starting to evolve, but we'll continue to monitor throughout this road trip. And then, again, once we get through the month of October, we'll be able to have a little better idea over, what the line combinations are looking like and everything else.
Hey, Weaver, just before we go, and thank you again for doing this, do you have you seem to have a go-to food spot in most of the stops in the NHL. What have you been eating in St. Louis? And have you had the toasted ravioli, which is a St. Louis staple, which I didn't know existed before I went there, and I actually thought was amazing.
I was thinking of you on my walk back to the rink today, Huss. I walked by Bobby's place. Still got the locks, still got the locks on the door, but they still have the etched in silver on the walk past. So I was definitely thinking of you before the hit today. I did get back to Sauce on the Side, my classic calzone place here in St. Louis, and had a little barbecue for dinner the night before. So,
do you have a take on the St. Louis style pizza?
Honestly, I have not had pizza here. I don't even know if I could say ever, Huss, to be honest. I know I've been told about it.
If you go out to a place and it's St. Louis style, it's like a very thin, it's almost like a cracker crust. And I'm pretty sure they go provolone instead of normal mozzarella. So it is. Anyways, if you're out there, grab a slice or something. I'll be interested in your take on that. I know you'll be well fed. Hopefully you'll see a great game tonight. And hopefully we're talking about a 6-0 team after this game tonight against the St. Louis Blues. Weaver, as always, thank you for the time, and we'll look forward to seeing you and Rennie fired up tonight after the game on KNR.
Yeah, thanks for having me as always, and sorry to answer your original question. I did not have the toasted ravioli this time, but it is a very tasty morsel. I'll enjoy it again another time, just even not this one. But also enjoy the football game. We know there's a lot at stake. on the CFL front coming up this weekend here. Lots of things on the go in the playoff push there, but should be a fun one there. But looking forward to this road trip, and should be a lot of fun articles here. Hoping to catch up with Jessica Campbell on Thursday after the morning skate to tell her story about becoming the first full-time member of an NHL coaching staff. So that should be a fun one, and then, we'll obviously have the coverage from Seattle and Calgary as well. So have a great weekend, my man. Good to talk to you early in the week, and always a pleasure to be with you.
Appreciate it. Safe travels, dude. There is the one and only Ken Weeb. Follow him on X at Weeb's World. And tonight, you know where to go. KNR after the game with Sean Reynolds. All right, let's get to some fans first. Fan feedback today. Lots coming in during that segment as we talked about, Logan Stanley staying in, Hayden Fleury taking a seat for a second straight game, and Campari Pack coming in. Fan feedback is brought to you by fansfirst.ca, your best option for buying and selling tickets with no added fees. What you see is what you pay. And by the way, I've been getting some great feedback, fan feedback, if you will, with the number of listeners that have utilized Fans First already this season. I've often used it to sell tickets. I think if you're a season ticket holder and you've got a couple extras that, you haven't had a chance to do it, the versatility of the site is, I think, better than you'll find anywhere else. And boom, next business day, money's in your account, quick and easy. So try it if you haven't yet at some point this season. All right, as far as the fan feedback for Fans First goes, there is a lot of talk just about this. And I think people sort of understand, that Stanley got in. I mean, I guess he was okay in that first game. Take it for what it's worth, first game back. But they do want to give him an opportunity to maybe get into a bit of a groove. That being said, a lot of people have been very impressed with what Hayden Fleury's done so far. And that's sort of my point, where the onus really on it, the competition within this lineup hopefully will bring out the best in all of the players, but also force a guy like Stanley to sort of sink or swim in that position. And I guess we'll see it. I'm just looking at right here, Hootman talking about Kapari, support Kapari so his confidence goes up and he can perform much better, maybe live up to his potential. Hootman, just on that, I think that goal that he scored in the first game of the season was massive for his confidence. I mean, he was out there a lot, just didn't do a lot last year and certainly wasn't rewarded at all. So for him to have that spot right off the bat and get the goal right off the bat was great. SK, Kapari is as good as Ehlers. That is not what Ken said. And he made a point of clarifying that. But at some points, I mean, he's got world-class speed, as we well know, and has shown it so far. It's just a matter of putting the rest of it together. It's your boy Bruce is calling a Morgan Barron goal tonight. Like the sound of that. I think the fourth line has been really good this year. Obviously, Kapari got that goal early on. Iafallo has been, effective at times, certainly playing a big role in the PK. We'll see what happens. Yes, everyone's having some fun with that quote from Ken. And then a little bit more on just Dylan Coghlan and his spot. I had sort of said that, I really think that Coghlan gets in if there's an injury on the right side of the blue line. Now, SK said he's right on, if you lose him on waivers, it's kind of easy come, easy go. But then talked about Elias. Listen, Elias right now is certainly on the depth chart, but playing with the Manitoba Moose, I think it's safe to say that right now he's the fifth right shot defenseman for Winnipeg, because the other four are with the Jets and he's with the Moose right now. But if someone does get injured, certainly with the great start that he's had in Manitoba, it could come sooner or later, but that's probably a little bit later on. Anyways, keep up the great stuff coming up with your fan feedback in the chat. Fan feedback is brought to you by Fans First, by fans, for fans, no fees. Great stuff today with John Hodge. And as I mentioned, huge Bomber game coming up on Sunday. We'll find out when we're getting back to Princess Auto Stadium. If you tuned in late, good news for Jet and Bomber fans, of which the Venn diagram, I think, has a pretty large circle in the middle. We won't have to choose between a CFL West final and the Jet game against the Dallas Stars that day. NHL just announced that Jets and Dallas have moved their game to 2 p.m. that day. So hopefully the CFL game, I think it was scheduled to go at 5:30. Hopefully they could maybe give us at least till 6 to get down there. But let's have the Bombers take care of business this weekend and have an amazing doubleheader of Winnipeg sports with a massive Central Division matchup leading into one game. Winner goes to the Grey Cup at Princess Auto Stadium. Of course, all of our Bomber reports brought to you by Princess Auto, founded and headquartered right here in Winnipeg. Huge sponsors of the Bombers, and of course, Winnipeg Sports Talk. You can find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around at Princess Auto. 2 locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Of course, our friends at Canadian Club, speaking of great supporters of ours that have been with us for a while, not only Winnipeg Sports Talk, but the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And that'll be keeping some Bomber fans warm on hopefully November 9th in the West Final, because, of course, Canadian Club is the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, available throughout Princess Auto Stadium. And it's also available at your local Manitoba Liquor Mart. So the next time you pop into the LC, make sure you check out the Canadian Club display and get Canada's oldest, famous, original Canadian whiskey, Canadian Club. And when you're at your vendor grabbing beers, make sure to keep your eyes out for Canadian Club and Ginger Ale, which is available at pretty much all vendors throughout the city as well. Our friends at Wallace & Wallace have been doing it for Winnipeggers now, since 1946, I believe. Listen, when it comes to fencing and overhead doors, there's only one place to call, and that, of course, is Wallace & Wallace. If your property needs the security and protection of a new fence, they've got you covered with vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood fences. And if you have a need for a new garage door, they've got the perfect fit for your home, as they've got Winnipeg's largest selection of overhead garage doors as well. You can give them a call at 452-2700. The Wallace & Wallace team will arrange a time to come out and give you a free estimate. You can also visit them at Wallace Fences, wallacedoors.com, or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Crescent off of Kenniston. And hey, gang, I think that beautiful weather has pretty much come to an end. It's going to be getting a lot more fallish, and then before we know it, winterish. Guys, if you're looking into your closet and realize you need to up your menswear game as we get into the new season, get on down to F Apparel at 190 Smith Street. Custom suits beginning at $400, chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and the best selection of menswear accessories in town. Make sure to give them a buzz as well if you're getting married. 15% discount for wedding parties when they get their suits at F Apparel. Pop by and see them, 190 Smith Street. And, of course, you can check them out online and make an appointment to come in for a fitting at that's EPHapparel.com. All right, with Remo away, I am going to get to the Cool Bet lines quickly, and it's a massive, massive night tonight in the National Hockey League, the Frozen Frenzy, with 16 games. But before we do that, last week, I believe it was, we had the chance to get together with a whole bunch of the Manitoba Moose before they started their season. Now, the Moose home opener is coming up this Saturday at 2 p.m. And what a day. Moose home opener at 2 p.m. Bison's final regular season game at 2 p.m. Bombers in Montreal at 2 p.m. There's going to be some tough choices to be made by Winnipeg fans that day. But one of the players that really stood out in training camp was Simon Lundmark. And we got a chance to sit down with Simon and get to know a little bit more about him. Here's that conversation right now on Winnipeg Sports Talk with Simon Lundmark of the Manitoba Moose.
All right, a pleasure to welcome in one of the real standouts of Winnipeg Jet training camp this year, Manitoba Moose defenseman Simon Lundmark. Simon, it's great to have you on Winnipeg Sports Talk for the first time. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm great. I'm fired up to get the puck dropped on both the Jet season and the Moose season so far. Sure. I imagine you must be in pretty good spirits. I mean, it really did seem like you had an awesome training camp. And by the way, a pretty nice snipe last Wednesday here at Canada Life Center as well, getting on the scoreboard. How did everything go for you from your perspective the last few weeks?
No, I like you said, I think I had a really good camp. I felt like the games I got to play too was pretty good too, and like you said, the snipe was pretty nice to score a goal too. So yeah, I'm happy with my training camp.
A second rounder in 2019. Obviously, we've got the COVID period, but now it was 3 years with the organization coming in here. How much further along do you feel this year? And did the team and the organization see a lot more of that from you in training camp, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I think first of all, I had a really good year last season, and I worked on a lot of things during the summer too, which, like off ice, worked on a lot of stuff, which I feel like showed on the testing we had. And then, also on ice things that really helped me to have a good training camp.
I want to ask you about last season, because it was, listen, being around, the Moose in the AHL for a long time, there's unique challenges. You've got guys getting called up. You've got guys injuries. Everyone wants to be in the National Hockey League. And when a team goes through what your team did in the early part of the new year last year, where you go a long period of time without winning a game, things can really go off the rails.
Yeah.
And the exact opposite happened. This team came together, played with desperation, almost a playoff-style hockey for the better part of the last 2.5 months. It ended up coming from way back and making the playoffs. When you look back at last season, what will you take away from what your team accomplished and what you guys can maybe benefit from that going into this season?
No, for sure, what you said. We had that stretch where, was it 11 games in a row we lost, which was a really tough time. But then I think we just said to each other that we know we can play good, but we just didn't in for 11 games, which is way too long. But then we came together and we just got that one, the 12th game there, and we won it. And then we just felt like we're playing well. Like
just flip the script.
Yeah, exactly. And then I feel like that turned the whole season around, and we just started to play well every single game, I feel like. And I think we were one of the best teams in our division in the last part of the season. So that's for sure something we can take going into this season too. And just knowing that whatever happens, if we're playing bad, we know we can turn it around quickly. And we know and we believe that we can play well.
You mentioned that you had a big season individually as well. Playing in a bigger role as well. When you look back at these last few seasons, and we talk a lot about the development that young players have in the American Hockey League with here. How much have you benefited from playing in the American Hockey League here with the Moose, and how much further along do you feel now after a really good camp with the Winnipeg Jets, as opposed to maybe where you were going into a couple seasons ago?
Yeah, I think last season I took a big step, and the coaches and everyone around have been really on me to play harder and win more 50-50 battles, which I feel like was a big step for me last season. I feel like I really improved that, and that's probably why I got a bigger role too. And that going into this season, of course I bring that from that season, and just having the confidence that I know I can do that. And from the training camp, which was good, also get more confidence in
Let me ask you about the difference between the European game to North America. We've seen Elias Salmonson, who played last year, had a real strong year. He's coming over and having his first year in North America. When you think of your move from Europe here, what were the biggest challenges for you, and what are the things that that you learn the most when you do come here to the American Hockey League, NHL training camp, as opposed to playing in the pro leagues over in Europe?
Yeah, it's for sure quite a big difference, actually. First of all, the rink is smaller here, which makes everything go a lot faster. So you really need to know what to do before you get the puck. And I also feel like the game over here is much more physical than the game in Sweden. So that's probably one of the biggest difference. I feel like it's just a physicality of the game. Just battles pretty much all the time.
Did you have like a welcome to North America moment, if you will? I mean, when you started off going, okay, wait a second, this is a little different than what I was used to before.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like the first game in the American League, after the game, I was like, wow, this is really high pace. So yeah, for sure.
Simon Lundmark's with us here. Moving into this season, we mentioned you had a real big year and a big camp as well. Do you have particular goals this year individually? Is there something that you're looking to improve on? And I guess from that, when you did get assigned to the Moose after having such a strong camp, what was sort of the message from management about what they'd like to see you do and continue to improve on?
Yeah. Consistency, doing the this simple things very well all the time, like first passes, going like breakout passes on the tape, getting back for pucks, just a consistency in all of the things. Needs to be up there all the time, and every game, every practice. So that's the main thing to bring.
Now, you are a Stockholm guy from Sweden. Tell us about the off-season. Do you go back to Stockholm, and how do you spend the summers when you're not here earning a living as a pro hockey player in Canada?
Yeah, no, I go back to Stockholm, like you said, and I spend, this year we had 4 months off, I think, which was a long summer. But I have all family there, so it's always really nice to spend a lot of time with them, going to cabin, see my friends, of course training. So summer is always great in Sweden. Me and my girlfriend really loves Sweden.
Hey, when you compare Sweden and Canada, from where you're from here to Winnipeg, are there some things that you find that are similar? And what are the biggest differences other than obviously the language everyone is speaking?
Do you mean compared to Winnipeg or Canada?
Yeah, well, we'll go with Winnipeg.
Okay. I don't know. Like the biggest difference is that it gets really cold here.
It doesn't get that cold in Sweden?
Up north it can get really cold, but now Stockholm usually it's around -5, -10, around 0 degrees during winter.
We would take that.
Yeah.
We would take that in January.
But it's not as much snow out here. But otherwise, I don't know. I feel like it is kind of different, Sweden compared to Winnipeg. But like outside of downtown Stockholm, there's a lot of like greenery, and I feel like there's a lot of greenery here, and lakes, stuff like that, cabins and stuff. So I feel like that's pretty similar.
Yeah, no, I would say that for sure. What about food? Is there a Swedish delicacy that you miss here in Canada that you hit pretty hard when you get back to the motherland?
I mean, Swedish meatballs, something that.
Does everyone eat those, or is that just an urban legend?
I mean,
is there a fast food joint in Sweden that you would go to and I'll get the combo one, and it's like Swedish meatballs and fries?
Actually, no. There's no fast food meatballs in Sweden. You will probably go to IKEA then.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same as here.
They actually do have the meatballs at IKEA, don't they?
Really
like the Swedish version of Costco. You go in, you do your laps, and then you get some good food. Right about. What is now that you've been in Winnipeg for a little bit, speaking of food, do you have a favorite go-to restaurant? Is there a place or two that you, and whether it's your teammates or your girlfriend, like to hit up when you've got some time away from the rink?
We like to try new stuff. We like pretty much all kinds of food. But I really like steak. So, I mean, if you just go for a dinner we haven't planned, we usually go to the Keg.
Yeah, can't go wrong with that.
Exactly. But then we like to try all different new things like pasta. Like we like Thai food too, sushi. So we like to try new things.
Well, Winnipeg's got a lot of great restaurants. Before we go, and speaking with some of your teammates, and I asked Parker Ford, hey, listen, Parker, if you are in charge of the team's playlist, the jukebox in the room, what are you playing? He says, well,
I'm a big country guy. I'll probably play country. Some of the Euro guys might not really appreciate that.
No.
If you're getting the controller, what's on the Simon Lundmark playlist, and who will be supporting that in the room, and who will be giving you the business?
I really like Kygo, Avicii type of music, which I feel like is kind of European vibe.
Avicii's Swedish, wasn't he?
Yeah. So people that would like that is probably Europeans. I heard that all Canadians.
Axel seconds that. Axel was on too, and he had a very similar answer.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Although he did say country music is getting a little bit bigger in Sweden now. At least it's just popular enough. He said Morgan Wallen, I guess, had a concert there, and there was a lot of people out there for it. So,
no, it's growing for sure.
But it's more. Is the Swedish House Mafia still a band, or are they more paving the way for the Aviciis of the world?
They actually separated, but then they go back together. So I think they're still producing music right now. But I haven't listened to them in a long time, actually. But they're good too.
I tell you, hey, you got to rep the home country, especially when the guys are having some fun down in the room. All jokes aside, though, congratulations on a great season and a great training camp.
Thank you.
It was a wonderful goal last Wednesday to put the finishing touches on that win, and can't wait to see you back on the blue line playing some big minutes and continuing to press towards the National Hockey League this year in the A, Simon. So good luck this season. Hopefully we can do this again later on this year.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Simon Lundmark on WST. All right, there you go. Our buddy Simon Lundmark. Very, very fun chat. I've got some more stuff. You guys are going to love the Axel one, too. We'll get that in hopefully before the weekend. But don't forget, Moose, 2 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, kicking off their home portion of the season. Let's fire it up and cheers to our friends at Little Brown Jug as we thank our friends for their great support and let you know about a Jets watch party coming up with LBJ and Boston Pizza.
You train day in and day out, learning new techniques, approaching new concepts, and living out the thrill of achieving your goals. Building a craft beer is no different. While you spend your hours on the ice, we spend ours here, brewing our trademark beer. Again, and again. Here's to pushing the status quo and challenging ourselves to build something memorable. 1919 by Little Brown Jug.
Yeah, we're pretty fired up that Little Brown Jug is now available on tap at select Boston Pizzas. So we're going to kind of get two of our great longtime sponsors together and get all of you together for a Jets watch party next Wednesday, a week tomorrow, October 30th. Dress up for Halloween if you want, but just make sure you get your butt down to Boston Pizza, Polo Park. Jets and Red Wings. We're going to have some fun intermission contests, a little Jets trivia. We'll have some prizes from Little Brown Jug. And, of course, Boston Pizza as well. Now, I would suggest if you're kind of coming, either come early, make sure you get your setup, or if you're looking for a bit of a bigger group, I would suggest you call BP Polo and reserve a table in the lounge for that game. Myself, Remus, Connor, Liz, our whole crew is going to be there. So hopefully we'll see you all there. And of course, while we're watching the game, not only will we have the extra stuff from Little Brown Jug, but every game you watch at Boston Pizza this season, you'll have a chance to win a trip for two to Boston to see the Jets and Bruins this year. Not to mention enjoy all your BP favorites like Cactus Cuts and the Triple Play Platter. Spin the BP prize wheel to win great BP food and swag from Royal Sports. And get in for that trip for two to Boston for Bruins, Jets, and airfare, deluxe hotel, tickets to the hockey game. And BP is also throwing in tickets to the Celtics and Bulls the night before. So get down for tonight and every night the Jets are playing at your local Boston Pizza, and you could win. But especially join us, Winnipeg Sports Talk, for a Jets watch party Wednesday, October 30th, 6:30 p.m., Boston Pizza, Polo Park. And, of course, that Royal swag that BP's got, no kidding, they went to Royal for their Jets gear, because when we're talking about hats, toques, hoodies, T-shirts, Q-zips, pants, jackets, and, of course, jerseys, custom made with your favorite player in all of the variations. Royal Sports has it all. #1 sports store in town. Also got tons of great Bomber gear if you're needing to load up on that before the playoff game at Princess Auto Stadium, as well as the NFL, the entire National Hockey League with jerseys and merch from around the league. And, of course, the biggest and best hockey section in town for over 40 years is the hockey leader in town. Everything from full equipment all the way down to stick tape and skate sharpening. It's waiting for you. Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. Follow them on Insta at Royal Sports Winnipeg as well for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. All right, before we wrap this up, Frozen Frenzy tonight. 16 games, all 32 teams going at it. Let's get over to Coolbet. We'll just go through every one of these matchups and I'll give you the favorite. Philly -118 home to the Caps. That's his 5 o'clock game. At 5:30, we got the Panthers and Wild. Panthers -145 faves. 5:45, the Lightning and the Devils get going. Devils are -157 home faves. Dallas is a road favorite in Buffalo, taking on the Sabres. Dallas -156. The Rangers are -217 favorites on the road in Montreal. The Leafs, despite playing back-to-back, Leafs and Tampa, the only teams playing on back-to-backs, as there was just one game last night in the NHL and one game tomorrow. Leafs are still -224 favorites in Columbus against the Blue Jackets. You got the Islanders at home. That's a 6:45 start. Islanders -165. The Jets are -150 favorites in St. Louis against the Blues. Blues +127. The Canucks -178 favorites in Chicago against the Blackhawks. The Avalanche and Kraken go at it. 7:30 our time. Chicago, Vancouver's at 7:15. Kraken +103. Avalanche -121. The Preds, do they get their first win tonight? I hope not. -127. I'll be on the Bruins +108. Carolina's at Edmonton. That's an 8 o'clock start. -131 for Edmonton, +111 for the Canes. Utah Hockey Club, slight favorites over Ottawa, -121. Flames, -117 favorites over the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Ducks, -152, home to the Sharks. And the final game, which starts at 10 p.m. our time tonight, the Vegas Golden Knights, -123 favorites against the Los Angeles Kings. Now, we do have a WST exclusive, which we have put together. Still can't believe we didn't get the 2 points from Scheifele and Connor each on Friday when the team scored 8. But we're 1-1 on the season. Let's try and get another big win tonight. We're going Jets to win. Kyle Connor to score a goal. Scheifele and Josh Morrissey both to get a point. That is over left margin. Click on the exclusives. You'll see the Sports Talk parlays. The EST guys have one for the Edmonton game, and the WST, as you can see, us getting it right there. +465, Connor goal, Scheifele Morrissey points, Jets to win. Hopefully we can lock that in. And then right up on the main page at the top, you'll see the combo cards. Lock Shot Partner Parlay. We're going Jersey. We're going Dallas. We're going Pittsburgh. And we're adding over 5.5 in the Kraken Avalanche. That one, we got a nice boost. It was 8-1 when we put it in, +922. And then all you people that love all the Canadian teams, Jake, of course, is in Toronto. Dusty's in Edmonton. I'm in Winnipeg. For the community parlay tonight, Leafs to win, Jets to win, Oilers to win. That one is boosted up to +375. The DGen Den guys have something going on. And then the apple picking season has been great. This is the assist prop. Who do we got tonight? Sam Reinhart, Artemi Panarin, Jack Eichel, +554. That one cashed 3 consecutive days last week. That one is one that we've been really enjoying as of late. Oh, and Josh Morrissey's in on the points from the point. Points for defensemen. Josh Morrissey, Cale Makar, and Jake Sanderson. That one is at +308. So we've got tons up for you. It's the biggest day of the year. Dusty did a 15-1 a 15-game parlay. I think I put an 11-gamer in, but a special shout out to Trevor Savage, a lock shopper, ES-tier, that bet $3.90 on a 13-game NFL parlay on the weekend. Had all 11 going into last night. He had the Ravens and he had the Cardinals. The Cardinals kicked the field goal in the last seconds of the game, walk it off. And the Savage goes 13 for 13 and turned $3.90 into $3,500. Holy smokes. Congratulations. Maybe tonight's the night we hit a banger for the National Hockey League. Of course, coolbet.com is where you'll go. Use the promo code WST if you haven't played there before for a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. And by the way, a week today is our next Coolbet Winnipeg Sports Talk, Edmonton Sports Talk Lock Shop Poker Series. Anyone that's been in with us in the first couple, I think, has had a great time. The last one was an absolute blast. We're doing it again next Tuesday. It'll start at 9 p.m. Winnipeg time, 8 o'clock in Edmonton. What you don't want to do is just when you're at Coolbet, click on poker, download the poker app, and then go into tournaments next Tuesday. Register, and we will see you there. We'll have a $100 bounty on my head, $100 bounty on Dustin's head, maybe Remus as well, like last time after he was second in the first tournament. All right, that is going to do it for us today. Man, next week's going to be fun. Jets Leafs on Monday, poker tournament on Tuesday, watch party when the Jets take on the Red Wings on Wednesday. Can't wait for it. But, of course, we've got a big weekend coming up as well. I'm going to be gone for a couple of days. I'm going to see the Chiefs Raiders in Vegas. Remus will be back to take over with Andrew and Connor on Friday. And then Leafs, Jets, Amazon Prime game. The Crew coming to the Peg for Monday. So no rest for the wicked, gang. And, of course, huge football weekend and football Saturday here. Great conversation about the Bisons and Bombers earlier today with John Hodge. Appreciated him coming on. Great stuff with Ken, as always. The puck drops at 7 tonight. Don't forget Kenny and Rennie. After the game, of course, the Illegal Curve doing their thing as well. That is going to do it for us. Big thanks to Andrew Z, AZ, making it happen behind the scenes while Remus is away. Thanks to all of you for hanging out and being a part of the show. And a huge thanks to all the sponsors that make Winnipeg Sports Talk happen each and every day. We'll be back tomorrow. Full recap of tonight's game. Murata Tesh is going to join us. We'll also break down the entire Frozen Frenzy and the highlights of it with Jonathan Davis from West Coast Hockey and much, much more. That is going to do it for us. Enjoy the game tonight, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. Make sure you've hit that subscribe button if you're with us on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up before you go if you haven't already. Tell a friend about WST, where they can find us on podcast or YouTube. And make sure to join me tomorrow, 1 p.m., as we fire it up again on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Have a great night, everyone, and go Jets.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home! Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.